It was a bright and warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that felt made for spending time outdoors. The family had decided to take a break from their usual routine and head to the park. It wasn't anything fancy, just a quiet spot they had found on one of their walks a few weeks ago. There were big leafy trees providing shade, a grassy area that stretched toward a small playground, and a gentle breeze that carried the smell of freshly cut grass. They had packed a small picnic with sandwiches, fruits, and juice boxes for the kids. Everything felt calm, ordinary, and safe. The children ran ahead, chasing each other around the grass, their laughter echoing through the park. The mother set down a blanket and unpacked the food, smiling as she watched the kids tumble over each other in playful games. The father leaned back against a tree, watching the scene unfold. He felt the kind of peaceful satisfaction that only comes from a simple family day, free from the stress of work and errands. For a moment, nothing else existed except the soft rustle of the leaves, the children's laughter, and the quiet hum of life around them. Then, without warning, a siren pierced the air. The sound was sudden, loud, and startling. 2 patrol cars appeared around the corner, lights flashing but without the usual urgency of a dangerous situation. The father immediately tensed, his eyes following the vehicles as they rolled to a stop near where the family had set up. Something didn't feel right, but he didn't yet understand what had happened. The officer stepped out, moving with a kind of alertness that made the air feel heavier. They approached the family cautiously, their hands near their belts, eyes scanning as though expecting trouble. The mother instinctively called the children back, her voice soft but firm. The children, sensing something was wrong, ran back and clung to her side. The father stood, straightening his posture, trying to appear calm even though his heart was racing. "Good afternoon," one of the officers said, though the tone was clipped, not friendly. "We received a call about suspicious behavior in this area. Can we ask what you're doing here?" The mother took a breath and tried to keep her voice calm. "We're just having a picnic," she explained. "We come here sometimes. It's a nice day and the kids wanted to play." The officer didn't reply immediately. He glanced at his partner, then back at the family. There was a brief pause, and in that pause the mother could feel the judgment in their gaze. It wasn't just a simple check. It was as if the officers were deciding whether the family belonged in that park at all. The children, sensing the tension, huddled closer to their parents, their small hands holding tight. "Do you have ID?" the other officer asked. His tone was sharper this time, leaving no room for hesitation. The father reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, handing over his identification. The mother followed suit, producing hers. The officers examined the cards, flipping them between their fingers with careful scrutiny. Every second stretched longer than the last, making the family feel exposed and vulnerable. Around them, other park-goers began to notice the scene. Some slowed their jogs, some stopped walking their dogs, and a few lingered on benches to watch. No one stepped in yet, but the looks of curiosity and concern added to the family's anxiety. The father noticed a woman taking a video on her phone. The sight made him feel a mixture of frustration and relief. Frustration because the attention highlighted how unusual this kind of scrutiny felt. Relief because if anything went wrong, there would be witnesses. The officers asked more questions, each one feeling increasingly pointed. "Where are you from? Why are you here? How long have you been in the area?" The mother tried to answer patiently, explaining that they lived nearby and often came to the park to relax. But no matter how calmly she spoke, it seemed the officers were unconvinced. Every answer was met with a raised eyebrow or a skeptical glance. The father's mind raced. He tried to remember if they had done anything unusual. Had the kids been too loud? Had they wandered too close to someone else's picnic? Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, yet here they were, treated as if they were intruders in their own neighborhood. He felt a tight knot in his chest, a mix of anger and fear. The situation was escalating, and he needed to stay composed for the sake of the children. The children, meanwhile, were growing more restless. One of them tugged at the mother's sleeve. "Mom, why are they talking to us like that?" she whispered. Her small voice trembled slightly, and the mother's heart ached. She knelt down to meet the child's eyes, forcing a reassuring smile. "It's okay," she whispered back. "They're just asking questions. We'll be fine." But inside she was just as unsettled. The situation felt wrong, unfair, and completely unnecessary. Time seemed to stretch. Every second felt like a test of patience and self-control. The officers continued to scan the family, their eyes lingering in ways that made the father feel like they were measuring the family's worth. It was exhausting just to stand there feeling scrutinized for no reason. The father caught himself clenching his fists, then unclenching, reminding himself to breathe. He didn't want to make the situation worse, not when the children were so scared. Nearby, other families watched quietly. Some whispered to each other, expressing disbelief at the scene. Why would they even call the police? One parent murmured, "They're just having a picnic." It was a thought that the Johnson family shared in their own hearts. How could enjoying a sunny afternoon be considered suspicious? How could laughter and play be mistaken for wrongdoing? The officers asked if they could search the family's belongings. The mother's stomach dropped. "Is that really necessary?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. One officer nodded, a faintly authoritative gesture, and the father stepped forward. He tried to remain calm, speaking in a measured tone. "We haven't done anything wrong. We're just here for the afternoon. You can see everything is normal." But the officers didn't seem convinced. They began to move closer to the blanket where the family had spread out their food and toys. The father instinctively positioned himself between the officers and the children. The mother held the younger child close, whispering soothing words. Fear and frustration mingled in the air, but the family refused to panic. They had to keep their composure, even though it felt like the situation could spiral out of control at any moment. Finally, one officer stepped back slightly, apparently communicating silently with his partner. The tension didn't ease, but there was a momentary pause that allowed the family to breathe. If only a little. The father took this moment to glance around. People were still watching, some recording, others whispering. He felt a strange mix of exposure and vindication. They were being unfairly targeted, yes, but at least there were witnesses who could see what was happening. The mother adjusted the blanket, trying to make the children feel safe. "It's okay," she said again, her voice gentle but firm. "We're okay," but inside she felt a simmering anger. How could a simple day in the park turn into a test of their right to exist in public spaces? The father's mind raced, thinking about how quickly assumptions based on skin color had turned an ordinary picnic into an ordeal. As the officers continued to question them, the father realized that staying calm was not just about politeness. It was a strategy for safety. He knew that arguing or showing frustration could escalate things. So he stood tall, answered questions clearly, and kept his voice steady. The mother mirrored his composure, holding the children close, speaking softly but firmly. Together they tried to project normalcy, even as their hearts raced. By now the children were clinging to their parents, unsure of what to think. They had never experienced anything like this, and the sudden seriousness of the adults around them made the park feel suddenly unsafe. The father knelt down briefly to the children's level, offering smiles and gentle words. "We're okay," he said. "Everything is fine. Just a little mix-up." He wanted them to believe him, even as he tried to convince himself. The officers exchanged a few words quietly, their body language signaling that they were deciding what to do next. The father watched closely, aware that the situation could change in an instant. Every instinct told him to stay calm. Every part of him wanted to protest the unfairness of it all. But he reminded himself that the children's safety was more important than being right in the moment. Minutes felt like hours. The mother kept offering quiet reassurances, the children clinging tightly and the father standing firmly, holding his ground without escalating. The air was thick with tension, but also with the unspoken understanding that this encounter was about more than just a simple picnic. It was about assumptions, about fear, about judgments made too quickly and too harshly. Finally, the officers stepped back slightly, allowing the family a brief moment of space. The father exhaled quietly, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. He knew the situation wasn't over, that the officers still had questions, but at least there was a small pause in the intensity. The mother adjusted the children again, giving them a reassuring squeeze, whispering that they were okay. In that moment, the family realized just how fragile the sense of safety could be. A peaceful afternoon had been turned into an ordeal, not because of anything they had done, but because someone had assumed the worst based on appearances. Yet they also realized something else: they had each other, and together they could navigate even the most unexpected challenges. Even as the tension lingered in the air, the family held on to one another, silently agreeing that they would face whatever came next with courage, calm, and dignity. They had survived the first wave of fear and uncertainty, and they were determined to see the day through. No matter what else might happen, the moment of pause from the officers felt fragile, like a thin thread, holding the family's sense of safety together. They stood there, frozen for a heartbeat, unsure whether the tension had lifted or merely settled in a different way. The children clung to their parents, their small hands gripping tightly, sensing the unease even if they didn't fully understand it. The mother whispered gentle reassurances, trying to mask her own rising anxiety. She told them everything was fine, that the officers were just asking questions, but her words didn't quite reach the quiet corners of her own fear. The officers finally began to speak again, and the father felt a tightening in his chest. Their tone hadn't changed, still edged with suspicion, as if nothing he said could undo the assumptions they had already made. Questions came faster this time. "Why are your kids running around like that?" one asked. "Are you locals or just visiting?" Another officer moved closer to the family's blanket, eyes scanning the children's toys, the lunchboxes, the small cooler filled with drinks. The father instinctively stepped forward, placing a hand on the edge of the blanket, silently signaling that he would not allow the children to feel threatened. The mother noticed the children's faces growing pale. One of them whispered, "Mom, why are they looking at us like that?" Her voice trembled, and the mother felt a pang of guilt mixed with frustration. She bent down to look her child in the eyes, kneeling in the grass so they could see her face. "It's okay," she said softly. "They're just asking questions. We didn't do anything wrong. Everything will be fine." But even as she said it, her own doubts lingered, her mind racing with the unfairness of the situation. How could a day in the park, a simple outing, turn into a test of their right to exist freely in public? The father tried to respond calmly, explaining again that they were just enjoying the afternoon. "We come here often," he said. "This is a safe place for the kids to play. We didn't bother anyone." But the officers exchanged glances, a silent conversation that the family could not hear. The father's stomach knotted, sensing that no explanation would satisfy them. The questions continued, sharper now, hinting at disbelief rather than curiosity. Each one carried the weight of judgment, the implication that the family did not belong in that space. The children grew restless, their earlier playfulness gone, replaced with unease and fear. One of them tugged at the mother's sleeve again, and the mother wrapped her arms around both children, holding them close. She whispered comforting words, trying to restore the calm that the park had offered just moments before. The father glanced around, noticing the other people in the park watching intently. Some whispered to one another, eyes wide with concern. Others kept their distance, unsure whether to intervene or merely observe. A few held phones, capturing the moment silently, evidence that the family was not alone in their experience. The father's mind raced. He wondered why assumptions had been made so quickly, why a peaceful picnic could be mistaken for something suspicious. He knew that the world could be unfair, but the intensity of this encounter left him momentarily stunned. He clenched his fists, then relaxed them, reminding himself to stay composed. Arguing, he knew, would only escalate the situation. The children's safety came first, and staying calm was the only way to protect them. One officer stepped closer, asking for more detailed identification from each adult. The father complied, handing over his wallet while the mother provided hers as well. The officers examined them closely, flipping the cards in their hands, scrutinizing the information as though it held some hidden clue. Time stretched in the small bubble around them. Every movement of the officer's hands, every glance felt like it carried judgment. The father noticed the children's wide eyes, and he felt a surge of protectiveness. He could not let them feel small or unsafe. The mother kept speaking gently to the children, explaining in simple words that nothing bad was happening, that the adults were just talking. Yet the children's anxiety was visible. One child hid behind the mother's legs, peeking out nervously at the officers. Another clutched a small toy, holding it like a shield. The mother whispered again, stroking their hair and reminding them to breathe. She wanted to make the world seem safe again, even if just for a few minutes. The officers asked to search the family's belongings. The father's heart sank. "Is that really necessary?" he asked calmly, though the tightness in his voice betrayed his unease. One officer nodded, signaling that they were indeed serious. The father shifted his stance slightly, positioning himself protectively between the officers and the children. The mother moved closer, holding the younger child firmly against her chest. The park, once a place of laughter and freedom, now felt tense and heavy, as if the air itself had grown thicker. The father's thoughts ran rapidly. What could have prompted this? What had they done to attract such suspicion? He thought about the moment they arrived. The kids running freely, the family setting up a simple picnic, nothing more. And yet here they were, judged and questioned in a way that made every second feel like an ordeal. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He reminded himself that panic would not help, that staying calm was the best protection he could offer the children. Around them, the park seemed to have quieted. The laughter of other children playing faded into the background. Birds continued to chirp, but their songs felt distant, overshadowed by the human tension unfolding nearby. A few joggers slowed down to watch. Some looked puzzled, others sympathetic, while a few seemed uncomfortable with the sight. The family felt their eyes, the weight of being observed amplifying the pressure. Yet, in a strange way, the presence of witnesses also offered a faint reassurance. They were not alone in this moment, and someone was seeing the truth of what was happening. The officers continued to ask questions, each one cutting sharper than the last. Why are you here today? Are you waiting for someone? Do you live around here? Each inquiry, though simple on the surface, carried the subtext of suspicion. The father answered carefully, stating their reason for visiting the park and clarifying that they lived nearby. The mother chimed in, her voice calm but firm, emphasizing that they had done nothing wrong. Yet the officer's expression suggested that their explanations were not enough. The children grew more tense. One of them fidgeted, twisting a small bracelet around their wrist. Another whispered to the mother, asking if they were going to get in trouble. The mother hugged them tightly, whispering, "No, sweetheart, we're fine. Everything is fine." But she felt the unfairness of it all gnawing at her. How could enjoying a day in the sun and running freely be considered suspicious? How could the simple act of existing in a public space bring fear and doubt into a family's life? The father noticed the officers exchanging glances once again. Something unspoken passed between them, a silent discussion about what to do next. The father's mind was racing, imagining all the possible outcomes. He tried to focus on the here and now, on keeping the children calm, on ensuring that they felt safe despite the discomfort and fear that surrounded them. He knew that panic would only worsen the situation. Staying composed was the only way forward. The mother continued her quiet reassurances, speaking in gentle tones, reminding the children to breathe and to trust that the adults were handling the situation. She adjusted the blanket and the children's positions, trying to offer them some semblance of normalcy. The father observed, grateful for her support, and he mirrored her calmness, standing tall and answering questions clearly and politely. Together, they created a small island of stability amidst the tension, a way to keep the children grounded even as the situation threatened to spiral. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. The officer's eyes moved over the family repeatedly, lingering on the children, on the picnic items, on the parents. Every glance carried judgment, a subtle but heavy reminder that they were being evaluated not for what they had done, but for who they were. The father's chest tightened. He swallowed hard, keeping his voice steady as he answered questions, careful not to give the officers any reason to escalate. The mother held the children close, whispering again that it was okay, repeating the words until she could feel a small sense of calm returning. The park itself seemed to hold its breath. The usual sounds of a sunny afternoon, the laughter of other children, the hum of conversation, the rustling of leaves, felt muted, overshadowed by the tension surrounding this family. The father glanced around at the other people watching. Some were simply curious, others clearly disapproving of the officer's behavior. A few had phones out, quietly recording, perhaps hoping to capture evidence that the situation was unjust. The father felt a mix of relief and discomfort. Relief that the truth might be seen. Discomfort that their private moment had been turned into a public spectacle. Finally, there was a slight pause in the questioning. The officers seemed to be considering their next move. The father and mother exchanged a brief glance, silently agreeing to hold their ground and protect the children. The tension remained, but there was a fragile space of calm that allowed them to breathe a little. The mother adjusted the children again, holding them close, whispering that they were okay, that everything would be fine. The father nodded quietly, feeling a sense of solidarity with her and a renewed determination to keep their family safe. no matter what happened next. Even in the midst of fear and confusion, the family tried to maintain normalcy. They reminded themselves that they were together, that they were safe with one another. They had survived the first wave of suspicion and tension, and they would face whatever came next with courage and patience. The park, once a place of carefree joy, had become a test of endurance, but they refused to let it break them. Each breath, each gentle reassurance to the children, was a quiet victory, a way to claim back a small piece of peace in an unjust moment. The father stood tall, answering the officer's final questions in this round with measured calm. The mother kept the children close, whispering gentle encouragements. And the children, sensing the strength of their parents, began to calm slightly, trusting that the adults around them could navigate the situation. Though the shadow of suspicion still lingered, the family had found a way to hold on to safety and dignity, even in the face of misunderstanding and judgment. The pause from the officers seemed to stretch on forever. The family stood quietly, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The children clung tightly to their parents, unsure of what would happen next. The mother whispered gentle reassurances, stroking their hair and reminding them to breathe. She tried to keep her voice steady, but her heart was racing. The father could feel the tension in the air, every subtle movement and glance from the officers carrying an unspoken question. "Do you belong here?" Then the father made a decision. He took a deep breath and stepped slightly forward, trying to project calm and confidence. He knew that fear and hesitation could only make the situation worse. The officer's eyes followed him, narrowing slightly as if challenging him to explain himself. He held his identification out a little more deliberately this time, making sure it was clearly visible. "I understand why you might be concerned," he said, keeping his voice even. "But we haven't done anything wrong. We're just here to enjoy the park. I hope that helps clarify things." One officer took a step back, squinting at him, almost as if trying to measure whether his words were sincere. The father's posture remained straight, his tone steady, and his eyes met theirs without wavering. He felt a strange mix of fear and determination. Fear because the situation could escalate at any second, and determination because he refused to let the children see him falter. The mother noticed a flicker of change in the officer's demeanor. They were still cautious, still skeptical. But there was a subtle shift. The father's calm confidence seemed to demand a different kind of attention. It wasn't anger, it wasn't defensiveness, it was a quiet authority that made them pause and reconsider. She felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this could be the moment when the situation began to turn around. One of the officers finally asked, "Can you tell me more about who you are? Your background?" The father nodded slowly. He realized this was the moment to be transparent, to show who they really were. "I served in the military for several years," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I've worked in the community, helping to support local programs and youth activities. I have nothing to hide, and I'm happy to show my credentials." The officers exchanged glances again. This time, the pause felt heavier, loaded with surprise. They hadn't expected the family to be ordinary people going about their lives, much less someone with a history of service and community involvement. The father slowly opened his wallet and handed over his military ID along with his professional badge. The officers examined them carefully, and the tension in the air began to shift. The children, sensing the change in the adults, became slightly less anxious. The mother gently encouraged them to take a deep breath and reminded them that everything was going to be okay. The younger child clutched a small stuffed animal, squeezing it tightly while watching the officers. The father crouched down briefly to be at eye level with the kids, offering a reassuring smile. "See," he whispered, "everything's fine. We're safe." The officers finally stepped back as if recognizing the truth in the father's words. Their tone softened slightly. "We just needed to be sure," one of them said. "It's our job to check, but now we understand better." The father nodded politely. "I appreciate that. I just want to make sure the kids can enjoy the park without feeling scared." His words carried a quiet dignity, a reminder that the family had done nothing wrong and deserved respect. The Mother adjusted the blanket and the children's positions, trying to restore a sense of normalcy. She offered juice boxes to the kids and encouraged them to play a little, even as the officers lingered nearby. The father stayed close, keeping a protective eye on both the children and the adults who had caused them fear just moments before. He knew the situation wasn't entirely over, but the shift in energy was significant. Nearby park-goers had noticed the exchange. Some whispered to each other, expressing relief and admiration for the father's calm handling of the situation. Others continued to record discreetly, capturing evidence that the family had been targeted unfairly. The mother noticed a few people nodding at them sympathetically, small gestures of solidarity that reminded them they were not alone. The officers asked a few more questions, now more about routine verification than suspicion. They inquired about the children's ages, their school, and the family's typical activities at the park. The father answered clearly, politely, and without a hint of frustration, even though his mind was still buzzing with adrenaline. Mother followed suit, adding details where necessary to help the officers feel reassured. The children, encouraged by their parents' calm demeanor, began to relax just a little. They picked up toys from the blanket, tentative at first, but gradually engaging with each other again. Laughter returned, quiet at first, then a little louder, as they realized the tension was easing. The mother smiled, feeling a wave of relief. It had been one of the most unnerving experiences of her life, but seeing her children begin to feel safe again was a comfort she could hold on to. The father sensed that the officers were reassessing their assumptions. They had approached with suspicion, but now it was clear that their judgment had been based on appearances rather than facts. He realized how easily misunderstandings could escalate, how quickly fear and bias could overshadow reason. He felt a quiet determination to use this moment as a lesson, not just for the officers but for anyone who might witness the encounter. As the officers prepared to leave, one of them offered a brief comment. "Thank you for your patience," he said. "We understand now. You're just a family enjoying the park." The father nodded, a polite but firm acknowledgement. "We appreciate that. I hope this helps prevent misunderstandings in the future." The mother gathered the children together, holding them close. "See?" she whispered. "Everything's okay. We're fine now." The children looked up, relief shining in their eyes. They still clung to their parents, but the fear had begun to fade, replaced with a tentative sense of security. Once the officers left, the family took a moment to breathe deeply, savoring the quiet return of normalcy. The father looked around the park, noting the gentle sway of the trees, the laughter of other children, and the distant chatter of families enjoying their day. For a moment, it felt like the ordinary world had returned, though the memory of the encounter lingered in their minds. The mother spread out the blanket again, encouraging the children to eat and play. She offered sandwiches and fruits, trying to make the afternoon feel as normal as possible. The father stayed nearby, watching the children and keeping a quiet eye on the surroundings. Though the tension had lifted, he remained aware of how quickly things could change. The family had navigated the immediate threat, but the memory of suspicion and fear would stay with them for a while. The children began to laugh again, chasing each other across the grass, their earlier fear slowly melting away. The mother watched them, a small smile on her face, relieved to see their joy returning. The father joined in, running after the kids, feeling the weight of the morning and early afternoon start to lift. They had faced an unjust challenge together and had emerged intact. The experience left the parents with a mix of emotions, relief, lingering frustration, and a renewed sense of determination. They knew that racial profiling and assumptions could happen anywhere, but they also realized the power of composure and honesty in diffusing a tense situation. They had faced fear and suspicion head-on, protecting their children and maintaining dignity throughout. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, the family packed up their belongings. They reflected quietly on what had happened, talking in hushed tones about how easily appearances could mislead people, how fear could be mistaken for reason, and how important it was to remain calm in the face of misunderstanding. The children, tired but happy, held their parents' hands as they walked toward the car. They asked questions about what had happened, their curiosity mingled with lingering concern. The father answered carefully, explaining that sometimes people make mistakes but that they had nothing to fear when they were honest and stayed calm. The mother added gentle reassurances, telling them that their family was strong and that they had faced the day together. The drive home was quiet at first, each family member lost in thought. The mother glanced at the father, sharing a look that said without words how difficult the day had been and how proud she was of the way he had handled it. The father nodded, understanding completely. They had endured an ordeal, but they had protected their children and themselves. By the time they reached home, the sun had almost set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. They unpacked the car quietly, still reflecting on the events of the day. The children played briefly in the yard, laughter returning fully now, a sign that the immediate fear had finally been replaced by security. The parents watched, grateful for the ordinary joys that had almost been overshadowed by suspicion. That evening, as the family sat down for a simple dinner, the parents spoke gently about what had happened. They shared lessons about patience, honesty, and courage, emphasizing the importance of staying calm even when others are unfair. The children listened, absorbing not just the words, but the calm strength of their parents. It was a quiet moment of growth and reflection, turning a frightening experience into an opportunity to teach resilience and dignity. Though the day had begun like any other, it had turned into a test of patience, courage, and composure. The family had faced suspicion and fear, navigated it carefully, and emerged intact. The lessons learned that day about bias, about human behavior, about the importance of standing tall in the face of misunderstanding, would stay with them long after the sun had set and the park had emptied. They had survived the storm of judgment and suspicion, and in doing so, had found strength they did not know they had. The family understood that their ordinary lives could be interrupted by fear and prejudice, but also that their unity, honesty, and calmness could guide them safely through. After the officers finally left, the park seemed to breathe a little easier. The family gathered their belongings, folding the blanket carefully and packing up the picnic. Their hearts were still racing from the encounter, but there was a small sense of relief in the air. They had made it through the tension without losing their composure, and the children were beginning to relax. Yet even as they packed, the parents were aware that what had just happened was more than just a misunderstanding. It had been an experience that would stay with them for a long time. Around them, other parkgoers had begun to speak quietly to each other, murmurs of conversation carrying a mix of concern and curiosity. Some had witnessed the encounter, and their eyes lingered on the family as they left. A few had phones in hand, and though the family didn't approach them, the subtle awareness of being observed added a strange sense of connection. These strangers, who had seen part of what had unfolded, had also shared in the weight of the moment, silently recognizing the unfairness of the situation. The father helped the children gather their toys, placing them carefully into the small backpack. The younger child looked up at him with wide eyes, still a little shaken. "Daddy," the child whispered, "why did they think we were doing something bad?" The father knelt down and put a hand gently on the child's shoulder. "Sometimes people make mistakes," he said softly. "They see something they don't understand and jump to the wrong conclusion. But we did nothing wrong. We were honest and calm, and that is what matters." The mother nodded beside him, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. "It wasn't your fault," she added. "We were just enjoying our day like we always do. And we handled it together like a family. That's what's important." The children looked at each other, then back at their parents, gradually relaxing. They could feel the safety returning, the normalcy creeping back into their afternoon. The father zipped up the backpack and they started walking toward their car, the sunlight falling softly across the grass and casting long shadows on the path. The park, though quieted by the tension, still held its usual charm. The swing set in the distance, the laughter of other children playing, the rustling of leaves overhead. As they moved, a few people from the park approached. One woman who had been sitting on a nearby bench stopped them with a small smile. "I saw what happened," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. No family should be treated that way just for enjoying the park." The father nodded appreciatively. "Thank you," he said. "It was unexpected, but we're okay. We just want to enjoy our time together." The woman nodded, her expression sympathetic. "I'm glad you're safe. People need to see this, understand that these things happen, and change how they act." The family thanked her and continued walking, feeling a little lighter for the kind words. The mother glanced around, noticing a few more people who had witnessed the incident, their expressions a mixture of concern and quiet disapproval of how things had been handled. It was reassuring in a small way to see that others recognized the unfairness, even if only from a distance. Once they reached their car, the father opened the doors and helped the children inside. The mother placed their belongings carefully in the back, making sure nothing was left behind. They all took a moment to breathe before starting the engine, the quiet hum of the car a welcome contrast to the tension of the park. On the drive home, the father reflected on the experience. He thought about how quickly assumptions had escalated into fear and suspicion, and how easily it could have gone differently if they had reacted with anger or panic. He realized the importance of staying calm, of being honest, and of showing confidence in situations where others may unfairly judge you. The mother reached over and squeezed his hand. "You handled that so well," she said quietly. "You stayed calm, you protected the kids, and you didn't let fear take over. I'm proud of you." He nodded, feeling a quiet sense of gratitude for her support. "We did it together," he replied. "We stayed a family, and that's what kept us safe." The children, sensing the calmer energy, began to talk softly to each other, pointing out things they saw outside the window. Their conversation was tentative at first, but gradually it grew more animated, a sign that the fear was fading and the normal rhythm of family life was returning. Once home, they unpacked quietly. The mother offered the children snacks and encouraged them to play in the yard, letting them move freely in the safe space of their own home. The father stayed nearby, keeping an eye on them, ready to step in if needed, but also giving them space to recover from the afternoon's events. The children's laughter returned fully, filling the air with relief and comfort. Later, as they sat together on the couch, the family began to talk about what had happened. They spoke honestly, without anger or bitterness, about how unfair it had been to be targeted, simply because of the way they looked. The father explained the importance of staying calm, and the mother emphasized the value of honesty and patience. They used the experience as a teaching moment, helping the children understand that not everyone will treat you fairly, but how you respond can make a difference. The children listened intently, absorbing not just the words, but the tone and demeanor of their parents. They could sense the calm strength and dignity in the adults, and it offered them reassurance that they were safe and protected. The conversation was not easy, but it was important. It allowed the family to process the experience together, turning a moment of fear into an opportunity for growth and understanding. That evening, the father checked his phone and saw that some people from the park had posted about the incident online. Videos and comments were circulating, showing what had happened and expressing support for the family. The father felt a mix of emotions, relief that the truth was being seen, frustration that such incidents happened at all, and hope that sharing their story might help others understand and prevent similar situations in the future. The mother sat beside him, reading some of the supportive comments. "Look at this," she said softly. "People are standing up for you, for all of us. They see what happened and want to make a difference." The father nodded. "It's good that others can see the truth," he said. "Maybe it will encourage people to think twice before judging someone unfairly next time." The children, curious, peeked over at the phone. "Were people scared for us?" one asked. "Yes," the mother said gently. "Some people were worried and wanted to make sure we were okay. They were watching and hoping we'd be safe." The children nodded, feeling a sense of reassurance from the attention and support of strangers. It was a small comfort, but an important one, reminding them that they were not alone in the world, and that kindness and understanding still existed. Later that night, as the family prepared for bed, the parents spoke quietly with each other. They reflected on the day's events, considering how quickly ordinary moments could become extraordinary under the weight of fear and bias. They also talked about the importance of community, about the value of honesty and calmness, and about the lessons they wanted their children to carry forward. The children fell asleep knowing they were safe, protected by parents who had faced fear and emerged with dignity. The parents stayed awake a little longer, thinking about how to share their experience in a way that could help others, to turn a moment of injustice into a story of resilience and courage. In the following days, The family began to share their experience with close friends and neighbors quietly, thoughtfully. They spoke about what had happened, emphasizing the lessons of patience, calmness, and standing tall in the face of unfairness. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Friends and neighbors expressed empathy and concern, many sharing their own experiences of being judged or misunderstood. The conversations helped the family feel less isolated, reminding them that community mattered and that sharing truth could inspire understanding. The story began to spread more broadly as some of the videos from the park circulated online. Supportive comments poured in from people who had witnessed the encounter or had seen the clips. Many expressed outrage at how quickly assumptions had been made, but also admiration for the family's composure. The father and mother felt a sense of responsibility to continue speaking about their experience, hoping that by sharing it, they could help educate others about fairness, dignity, and respect. Through it all, the family remained focused on one thing: the well-being of their children. They wanted them to grow up understanding that fear and suspicion might exist in the world, but that honesty, courage, and calmness could guide them safely through difficult situations. They wanted their children to know that unfair treatment was not a reflection of their worth, but rather of the biases and fears of others. Even as the public reaction continued to grow, the family stayed grounded in their own lives. They continued their routines, returned to the park for small outings, and encouraged the children to play and explore. The memory of the incident remained, but it no longer carried the same weight of fear. Instead, it became a lesson, a reminder of resilience and the importance of facing challenges with calm determination. The parents also began speaking with local community groups, sharing their experience to raise awareness about the impact of assumptions and the importance of respectful interactions. They spoke at small gatherings, emphasizing patience, understanding, and the power of dignity in the face of prejudice. Each conversation reinforced their own strength and provided a platform to educate others about fairness and compassion. Through this experience, the family realized that while the world could be unjust, they could respond with courage, unity, and calm. They learned that standing together, protecting each other, and approaching challenges with honesty and dignity could make a difference not only for themselves but also for others who might face similar situations. The days after the park incident were quieter, but the memory of what had happened lingered in the family's minds. Each of them carried it in their own way. The children still asked occasional questions about why people had acted the way they did, and the parents answered with honesty and care. They explained that sometimes people make assumptions without knowing the full story, and that fear or misunderstanding can cause unfair treatment. The children listened closely, their young minds trying to understand a world that sometimes seemed confusing and unfair. The father often reflected on the experience quietly in the mornings before everyone was awake. He thought about how quickly the day had shifted from ordinary to tense, and how small actions, calm words, patience, composure, had made a difference. He realized that their response had not only kept the children safe, but also subtly reminded others that assumptions can be challenged with dignity. He felt proud of how they had handled the situation as a family. The mother spent time talking with the children about feelings, fear, and courage. She reminded them that their emotions were normal, that being scared when something unexpected happened was okay, and that they had done the right thing by staying calm and trusting their parents. The children began to understand that their family's strength came from unity and love, that being together could make even the hardest situations manageable. They also talked about how people around them had reacted. The kind words from strangers in the park, the supportive comments online, and the understanding from friends and neighbors, all of it helped them feel seen and understood. The family realized that while fear and suspicion exist in the world, so does kindness and solidarity. They began to notice these moments more often, small gestures that reminded them of the goodness that could balance the unfairness they had experienced. The father decided to take action to prevent similar situations from happening to others. He reached out to local community programs and spoke about his experience, focusing on patience, communication, and fairness. He emphasized the importance of understanding, of looking beyond appearances, and of questioning assumptions before jumping to conclusions. His words resonated with others, sparking conversations about empathy and respect that reached beyond the immediate community. The mother also found ways to turn the experience into something positive. She began writing down their story, not in anger or bitterness, but as a reminder of the lessons they had learned. She wanted to share the importance of staying calm, of protecting loved ones, and of responding to unfairness with dignity. She hoped that by sharing their story, other families could be prepared for moments of misunderstanding, and that perhaps some people might rethink their own assumptions in the future. The children, slowly but surely, returned to their normal routines. They played in the park again, more cautiously at first, but eventually with the same joy they had felt before the incident. Their parents encouraged them to explore, to run, to laugh, and to enjoy simple pleasures without fear. They wanted their children to reclaim the sense of freedom and safety that had been momentarily shaken. As weeks passed, the family noticed a subtle change in their own confidence. They had faced fear and suspicion, and they had emerged stronger and more aware. They had learned that calmness, honesty, and unity could turn a potentially frightening experience into a moment of growth. They began to see themselves not just as victims of a misunderstanding, but as a family capable of handling challenges with grace and resilience. At the same time, they continued to engage with their community. They shared their experience at school meetings, neighborhood gatherings, and small local events. Their story became a conversation starter, encouraging others to reflect on their own actions and biases. People who had witnessed the incident or heard about it expressed gratitude for the family's openness, noting how the story had helped them see situations in a different light. The father often reminded the children of the lessons he had learned. Courage isn't about fighting or arguing, he told them. It's about staying calm, speaking honestly, and protecting each other. That is the strongest kind of courage. The mother added, and kindness matters too. Even when people make mistakes or assumptions, there are always those who will see the truth and stand with you. Together, they reflected on how much they had grown as a family. The incident had tested their patience and composure, but it had also strengthened their bond. They learned to communicate more openly with one another about fear, frustration, and hope. They developed a deeper understanding of each other's strengths and the ways they could support one another in challenging moments. The family also noticed the small ways their story affected others. Neighbors would occasionally mention the incident in passing, expressing empathy or sharing similar experiences. Friends would ask how the children were doing and remark on the family's calm and dignified response. The father and mother realized that by staying composed and honest, they had not only protected their family, but had also inspired others to reflect and act more thoughtfully in their own lives. At home, evenings became a time for quiet reflection. The family would sit together, talking softly about the day, about kindness, and about fairness. They discussed how the world could sometimes be unfair, but also how people could choose to respond with patience, empathy, and understanding. The children listened closely, learning that being part of a family meant supporting each other, facing fear together, and finding strength in unity. The father also took time to speak with local authorities in a constructive way, sharing his experience to encourage better communication and understanding in the community. He emphasized the importance of questioning assumptions and being aware of unconscious biases. The mother supported him in this effort, using her calm perspective to highlight how families experience fear and vulnerability when judged unfairly. Together, they hoped to help create a safer and more understanding environment for everyone. The children began to see that their family could handle challenges and that they were surrounded by people who cared. Their sense of safety returned gradually, reinforced by the support of their parents and the positive responses from the community. They laughed more freely, played with less caution, and began to feel comfortable in public spaces again. Over time, the memory of the park incident became less about fear and more about lessons learned. The family reflected on how they had navigated the situation, how they had maintained dignity under pressure, and how they had relied on each other for support. They realized that their strength as a family was not just in avoiding danger, but in facing it together with honesty, calmness, and courage. The parents continued to model resilience and composure for their children, showing them that even when people are unfair, it is possible to respond with dignity and understanding. They demonstrated the power of patience, the importance of staying calm, and the impact of acting with integrity. The children absorbed these lessons, internalizing them as part of their understanding of the world and their role within it. The family also began to appreciate the small moments of everyday life even more. A simple walk in the park, a quiet picnic, or an afternoon of play became opportunities to celebrate togetherness, safety, and joy. They recognized the fragility of these moments, but also their importance, and they cherished them all the more for the experience they had survived. As the months went by, the story of that day in the park remained a part of the family's history. They would occasionally revisit it in conversations, not to dwell on the fear or frustration, but to remember how they had faced a difficult situation together and come through stronger. It became a story of courage, unity, and growth, a reminder of the family's resilience and the lessons they had learned about patience, honesty, and empathy. The parents also shared the story with close friends and community groups, using it as a teaching moment. They spoke about fairness, the importance of questioning assumptions, and the value of maintaining dignity under pressure. Their story encouraged others to reflect on their own actions, to consider how they might respond differently in moments of uncertainty or fear, and to recognize the impact of kindness and support. The children grew more aware of the world around them, learning to navigate challenges with calmness and confidence. They understood that unfairness could exist, but that it did not define their worth. They saw that courage could take many forms, from staying calm to speaking honestly, to protecting and supporting loved ones. These lessons, learned through experience rather than instruction, became a part of who they were and how they approached life. The father and mother often reflected on how much they had grown individually and as a family. They realized that the incident had tested not just their patience, but their ability to act with integrity, empathy, and understanding. They had faced fear and suspicion, and by responding thoughtfully and calmly, they had preserved their dignity and strengthened their bonds. Even as the world continued to challenge them in small and large ways, the family carried forward the lessons of that day. They knew that they had the tools to face uncertainty, the strength to protect each other, and the courage to respond with honesty and calm. They had turned an unfair and frightening experience into a moment of growth, resilience, and hope. The family's experience became more than a story of fear. It became a story of empowerment. They had faced judgment and suspicion, and through patience, calmness, and unity, they had emerged stronger and more aware. They had learned the importance of honesty, the value of support, and the strength that comes from facing challenges together. In the end, the park incident became a memory not of fear, but of lessons learned and strength gained. It reminded the family of the importance of standing together, of protecting one another, and of responding to unfairness with dignity and courage. It was a story they would carry with them, shaping how they interacted with the world and how they taught their children to do the same. Through it all, the family realized that even in moments of fear, even when faced with unfair assumptions, they could choose how to respond. They chose unity, they chose calmness, and they chose courage. And in doing so, they created a legacy of strength, understanding, and hope for themselves, their children, and the community around them.